you want to tell you something very important about World War II?
Yes, please.
I'm going to ask you the question and you tell me whether this is relevant.
Yes, thank you.
It's very important to understand the history of World War II. It also affects our understanding of the so-called post-war era. Now that post-war era, namely in the wake of World War II, is a sequence of military interventions, essentially by the United States as well as NATO, and NATO waged its first war against Yugoslavia in 1999. Now let me flash back to World War II. It's well documented that the United States was involved in the war industry in Nazi Germany. There were several important companies which were present, but there was also a prominent member of the Bush family who was called Preston Bush, and he was also involved in investment on behalf of US capital in Nazi Germany. But there's another element. In 1934, upon the accession of Adolf Hitler, prior to 1934, there was a meeting between Hitler and representatives from Wall Street and also from the Bank of England, which expressed their support for Adolf Hitler and financed his election campaign. This is a study by a prominent Russian scholar, but it is corroborated, and also that the Dulles brothers, which were the founders of the CIA, were involved in these discussions. And then upon Adolf Hitler's appointment as Chancellor, there were links between the US government and the Nazi government. But what is far more significant, and that during the period between the election of Adolf Hitler, because initially he was elected, to the commencement of World War II, there were many. Well, first of all, the United States did not enter the war until 1941. Okay, we know that. But Operation Barbarossa started also in 41, but it started in June 1941. And the question I would ask to my students, what do you need to wage a successful and large-scale military operation in terms of resources, armaments, soldiers, etc. And that would be the question that I would ask. And there was something that they didn't have, and that was petrol. Now, there was some petrol which was imported from Romania, and Romania was a Nazi sponsored state. They relied on petrol from Romania but it was only minimal, less than 10% of what they required to wage a major military operation. The Operation Barbarossa was tremendous in terms of movement of troops, in terms of tanks and so on. It was essentially land, but it was also the Air Force and so on. But they didn't have the petrol. Now, who provided the petrol? Standard Oil of New Jersey, today it's called Exxon. It was the giant of the petroleum industry. It was also the Rockefeller family, and they provided petrol to Nazi Germany up until 1945. My conclusion, that this has been studied in great detail, but I say that the history of World War II is totally misunderstood, because the United States was providing petrol to Nazi Germany, and if they had abided by the treaty, which is called Trading with the Enemy, there would not have been an Operation Barbarossa, and there would not have been a World War II, because Nazi Germany required petrol, and it was provided by an ally of the Soviet Union. This is irrefutable. The petrol would go through third countries. Sometimes it would go through Venezuela, Argentina, and Switzerland, and so on, as a means to escape. But everybody in the hierarchy of politics in the United States, they knew that the Rockefellers and, of course, Standard Oil were trading with the enemy. And it is only this trading with the enemy which led to this extensive movement of troops, which resulted in the Soviet Union, 26 million people were killed. And there were, of course, also Germans and other nationalities. You do not wage an operation, a military operation of that magnitude without fuel. That's you have to have fuel for your tanks, your armored cars, for everything. Which means that I certainly don't believe in the official history of World War II. Now, there was another element which is very important, is that the operation, what was called the Manhattan Operation, which was an initiative to develop nuclear or the atomic bombs, okay? The Manhattan Project, it was called the Manhattan Project. The scientific and analysis was undertaken under the head of Oppenheimer. This project started in 1939. That was even before the United States entered into war, but it was presented, and it still is, as a means of self-defense, because Nazi Germany allegedly was developing atomic bombs. That historians have demonstrated that was false, and that Hitler himself decided that they weren't going to get into producing atomic bombs as a means as an armament in World War II. I'm not. In other words, this development of the atomic bomb, which 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 was finalized ultimately in 1945 on the 6th and the 8th of August 1945, when they bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima was made out of uranium, and the one in Nagasaki was plutonium, and it was produced in this project of Alamo by Oppenheimer. Now let me proceed. There's one element again which is erased from world history, that on the 15th of September 1945, barely 2 weeks after the end of World War II, when the United States and the Soviet Union were allied, that the War Department releases a secret document which is now declassified, which consisted in a plan to bomb 66 urban areas of the Soviet Union with more than 200 atomic bombs, and that Hiroshima and Nagasaki would serve as a dress rehearsal. Now, when I say that, these documents show very clearly that they planned this very much on the basis of how many people they could kill in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and how many they wanted, how much was required for complete destruction. But these documents are on file. And mind you, this project was envisaged probably at a much earlier period than September 1945. But in September 1945, we have the official documents to the effect that ultimately their objective was to use the atomic bomb to destroy the Soviet Union. And those documents have to be read by people. What the Manhattan Project did was to trigger the arms race. Now, if there hadn't been a Manhattan Project, there wouldn't have been an arms race in the wake of World War II. So there we have a whole series of lies. We have the fact that the intent of World War II on the part of the United States was to destroy the Soviet Union and to use Nazi Germany as a means, in other words, as for them to do the dirty work. And also then they would say, we are supporting our ally, which is the Soviet Union, etc. They weren't supporting their ally, but they were supporting their enemy by providing them with petrol. And also there are many other dimensions of US involvement in the military industry and so on and so forth. So that is something which is fundamental. You don't win a war of that magnitude without petrol. And who had the petrol? The Rockefellers and Standard Oil of New Jersey. Yeah.
Thank you.